It's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids, where we teach little kids to talk and help parents understand their little kids. And one of the things that comes up in when I'm talking to parents is, my child can say and my child can say ah, but they can't say mama. Actually, and most of the time it comes out, they won't say mama, right? And this happens where we know our child can make sounds. We know that they can move their mouths, but they're not saying words yet. And why is that? And the completely unsatisfying answer is, we don't really know. There are many, many smart people who are way smarter than I am, working on that piece of it. And they're putting kids in scanners, and we're learning more and more every day about how the brain operates. But as to like why people can say certain sounds but not say certain words, there are a few steps when we're talking about like what has to happen between here and here to get sounds out of our mouths. And so one of those things is we have to have an apparatus, an oral mechanism that's functioning well. That means everything can move the way it's supposed to. And that seems like a pretty obvious step. And yet it's something we have to look at. If you've got a lot of facial asymmetry, if you have an undiagnosed cleft, most clefts are pretty easy to spot, some are not. If you've got tonsils and adenoids that are impinging on your ability to move things around, all of those can potentially affect how well kids are able to talk, or how many obstacles they have to overcome when they're first learning to speak. Okay, so hearing, another huge one. We must be able to hear well in order to speak well. And so if your child has chronic ear infections, for example, get them assessed, because if they've got any amount of fluid in their ears for any length of time, it's probably affecting their ability to, certainly to hear, also to listen and to speak at some point. So chronic fluid from, or obstruction from wax, for example. Ears are a big deal. We need our ears. After that, there's a whole lot of neural mechanisms that happen in order for us to make sense of what we hear, process it into sounds, and then change those sounds into movements. And so look at the accompanying blog post with this video, because it gets into a little bit, gets into a rabbit hole a little bit. But basically what has to happen in order for us to speak is we have to have sounds programmed in our brains, and then we have to put those sounds into an order that matches the words that we want to say. And then we have to send impulses from our brain to our mouth to make those sounds. It's like super complicated. And again, I've said this before on this channel, how anybody learns to speak is kind of a miracle. But there's a lot going on here. And so when kids aren't speaking, it's probably not because they won't. It's probably because right now they can't. And so it's 100% worth getting somebody who knows about all of the things that I just talked about, which would be a speech therapist or a speech pathologist, to look at your child and see if they can tease out what might be happening and begin to address it. I had an interesting conversation with a family recently who said that their geneticist had said, don't do speech therapy before 18 months because it's irrelevant. And that is not the case, and here's why. That's like super bad advice, actually. And here's why. Because all of those building blocks that we were just talking about, being able to hear the sounds, being able to transmit sort of muscle impulses that are going to help your mouth move in certain ways, all of that is happening basically since birth. And so when we're missing things, for example, if we have ear infections that are preventing us from hearing, then we're not registering those sounds. If those sounds are being registered, then we can't create them later because we don't have them. They're missing. And so all of that is happening before age 1. And actually research is showing us that it's happening like really, really early on. And so it's super important. Early intervention, I've said this before too, super important. And getting the advice, the expert eye of somebody who knows something about language acquisition, about speech development, about hearing and the brain and how all of that gets put together, totally worth doing. Until next time, take care.